I'd like to introduce Claudio Caldini. It's a special privilege and a pleasure to have you with us in the country.
Hello. I just want to thank also to Steve Anker from Calars and to Hyman from Los Angeles Filmforum, and also to Luciano Piazza that arranged all the details of my trip. And I will be delighted if you remain after the performance to talk with you and answer some questions. And I beg you to be patient because there will be 2 intermissions for setting the next performance pieces. So,
well, I guess as I was watching all of your work, I'm thinking such precision and such feeling for this, well, delicate isn't even the word, let's just say this very fragile medium. And I just, frankly, I'm astonished. I've seen work on, well, I haven't seen like this. I've seen it on laptops or on what have you, but yeah, I mean, for me, one of the wonderful things about the work is how distilled it is, but also how knowing about the medium that you're working with, how knowing it is. And that, and just for me, it seems that all of your years of working with these tools is manifest. It's not meaning it's all in front of us, and I think it's every gesture in the film, and even I'd say these performances is so careful and so aware of what you're doing. So I'm just, frankly, it's been a long time since I've seen 8mm used, well, to this extent in terms of what it can do. And it's wonderful to see, for me. Anyway, I guess that's more as a statement, but you've been working now with Super 8, SNO 8, I guess, for decades, right? For many years, and you're still doing it. Yeah. Well, can you fill us in a little? I'm not interested in just like a report, but I'm just wondering about how you stay with it, and. You know, I know that you used to live in Buenos Aires, and now you're living far away, actually. And so your life has also changed along the way, and slowed down perhaps. But also, I think the fact that you're still with us, you're still working in this territory, mining. So I just would like to hear you just talk about it a bit. Maybe how you feel about it, and looking back at it now after all these years.
Well, I think that Super 8 is my medicine. I think that is the only reason, because I still do it.
Can you elaborate? Can you say more?
Yes. Well, usually these kind of formal experiences are made on 16mm. But I started very young to work with Super 8, and 16mm in Buenos Aires was and is still very expensive, and the time I began and I was working in the 70s, the laboratories pay not many attention to the experimental filmmakers. Then I prefer to work alone in my house as in a laboratory, and I'm still doing. I made several pauses in the 80s because I started to make music, and I said once it was enough of Super 8 for me. and it was at the beginning of the 80s, in 84. So, but at the time I started also, I don't only made this kind of work, but also documentaries about artists or theater pieces, and when video tape started to be more available, nobody wanted to see more Super 8, and I give it up and started to make music. And when I wanted to do it again, because I wanted to make films for the concerts of electronic music, Super 8 was out of the market in Buenos Aires in 1986, because of the market was captured by the videotape. And we had 10 years without Super 8 in Buenos Aires, until 1997, that a small laboratory began there, and they started also to import the film stock. And as I was traveling twice or 3 times to Europe and India, I got the single 8 in France, and also once in Brazil and Uruguay, but it was not marketed in Argentina. And I found it also that, and in Spain also. Well, apart of technical and anecdotal things, I think that Super 8 is like a part of my body now. So I cannot give it up.
Single 8, by the way, is what Fuji's
yeah, this is Fuji's
variant of Super 8, close, pretty close.
Very close. I have this possibility of rewind and expose twice, 3 or more times without breaking the cassette.
Is that right? So you could grind for that?
Yeah, the cassette is like in the shape of audio.
A small technical detail I think would be worth sharing, which is the sound of the first piece.
Which is the sound of the first piece?
Well, the first performance.
I had a small contact microphone connected, touching the projector itself, and I processed it through the vocoder. The vocoder is a electronic processor of the voice signal or any other audio signal.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm glad that, I wanted you to talk about that because, well, for one thing, I found you were very physical. Very physical.
Physical.
Very physical. And I think that everything from hole punches to the sound to just that single frame phenomenon. And so, I'm sure you tried working with digital imagery before, and is it something that you gave a try and just realized it wasn't for you?
Well, I think that for work seriously with digital, you need a lot of time and dedication to the medium. And I started with digital a few years ago, and I'm doing something that is in the middle way of the cinema and the video art, and I'm still doing films with it. But I enjoy very much the lighting, the mapping, and all the kind of digital things that are not trying to imitate film. But I'm not able to do it myself now, and my sight is not the same. And when I am many hours in front of digital screen, I feel very tired. My eyes are no more that sharp.
Okay, well, that's great. Comments, questions? Sure.
I noticed that cars play a really large role in some of the films, and I was curious what your experience of car culture in Los Angeles has been since you arrived.
¿Puedes comentar algo de la cultura de los Estados Unidos aquí en Los Ángeles?
Aquí en Los Ángeles. I was very surprised that here in Los Angeles also cars are white, gray or black. As in Buenos Aires was. Only each 25 there is one red. And you are quite more civilized drivers than us, the Argentinians.
Can I ask also, they seem to like hold a sort of menacing presence in the films a little bit, and I was just curious to hear more about that.
Las películas con los coches son un poco agresivas. ¿Puedes comentar?
The films with car are aggressive. You mean about speed and persecutions in the fiction films?
Oh,
I don't understand exactly your question.
well, some of the films in the description, if I could look, there was one that was a direct commentary on oil and also on climate change, and I think that there was this sort of menacing, almost character to the cars as they sort of recurred and came back through the frame. And I was just curious what your relationship to that was. Yes.
Oh.
La clima cambiando.
Yes, well, I have not anything to say about it more than making this film. I feel overwhelmed by the city life full of cars, and we are breathing all that air. And how many cars are making noise and contaminate the air in this moment in the world? Well, it's a pity. I have not the solution, because also the agricultural machines are driven by petroleum and everything around with it. But electricity will be a solution, I hope so. Natural energy.
Yeah, I'm picking up on something Steve was asking me about this strong sense of physical reality in your work. I also sense that very strongly, and I can think of so many philosophers of the image, many philosophers of the image from Krakauer that would have had a field day if they could have written about your work, because there's something so astonishing about it that actually can explain, not even explain, it's beyond even explanation, but it can really give people who delve in the realm of ideas to really have a material object, a material sense of what are we thinking about and why. I'm sorry for the complicated statement, but I want to say I see your work as a philosopher poet of this audiovisual image. You really do think, you create things, images and sounds that together are, to me, someone who does come from that. from philosophy, truly philosophical and poetic, and help people like me understand what the nexus is between meaning and sense. In the midst of hallucination, it's really, really profound. And so I understand why Stephen was trying to push you to, as you know a lot more than you were telling us. That's something we suspect. I see a lot of Borges, that idea of the dream, reality is a dream, the dreamer. There is so much that even though you are a man of very few words, but there is so much in your work that instigates people to think in terms of rhymers. It's very ironic, you know.
Well, thank you very much for your appreciation. There is a lot of things in your words. I used to put reason into the form, into the technique, and the intuition in the form and meaning. I really don't work if I'm not inspired. I don't have many explanations for that, but I try to work only when I have a good reason for doing it, and that reason is always intuitive. So I cannot explain very much.
That's your gift, you can do it.
Thank you.
And let other people.
What you're suggesting, though, that I find interesting is kind of a paradox, which is that you're talking about philosophy and about literature, and obviously very word language dependent. And as you say, Claudio is someone of few words, but not only that, but his cinema is very censored, direct, and yet you find it very philosophical, very resonant. In terms of discursive, art, and that's very interesting to me too. That's a very interesting point. So when you're working, and you did say earlier to me that you work very, I didn't use the word slowly, but it sounds very gradual, and that you kind of live while you're making the work. You're not making the work necessarily in a very concentrated, product-driven kind of a way. These works really come into being over time, it seems to me. And that said, I mean, you're somebody who is clearly very reflective, and I'm sure you also are involved in many other pursuits in terms of the arts, or in terms of, and thinking, obviously. In addition to the creation, the acts of creation also. So I'm just wondering, with that in mind, even more, how does one trigger and actually influence, how does one influence the other for you in terms of creativity?
Well, music in first place, dance in second place. That explains a little of physicality of my work, because very late in my life I started to study dance, a sort of a spontaneous kind of dance, a German school, and it influenced a lot of my work. Not necessarily this performance, but those films, single image films. And a lot of things to think about my work. I'm sorry for that, because I'm quite tired from thinking after doing all these kind of hard sport risk. Because everything can break at any time, and I'm very concentrated when I prepare everything. I'm very nervous at the same time. I never lose my panic stage fright.
I'm interested in the kind of space that you need to create in order to show your work. It's obvious that even if it's not a performance, you need to be there because less and less people know how to work with Super 8 projector. So my question is, within Argentina, contemporary Argentina right now, what are the spaces that are open, the possibilities, the audiences to not only to see your work, but to teach it and continue it and create and inspire younger filmmakers to continue working that mode?
Well, a lot of possibilities at this time. I started to give a workshop in a film school in 1990 and remained there for more than 10 years. At that time it was the only film school that accepted the idea and the practice of something called experimental film in Buenos Aires. But now it is full of young people who want to make experimental films, and about 10 years ago I started my own workshop privately, and I had a lot of students, many, and I have stopped it now because there are, I have to put a lot of dedication there, and I have no time to make my own work. The same thing happened when I was a curator working in the Museum of Modern Art in Buenos Aires, and I have no time to make my own work. So I now stop it, but once a year I give a short workshop for who wants really to work with me, not for beginners, but with experimental filmmakers. But there is a lot of young Argentinian filmmakers that are showing their work in this show Istmo, and still growing.
I thank you very much for your performance. It was really a gift to see. I was curious, I noticed, I was very aware, probably also because of where I was sitting, of your subjectivity, of you performing your piece. And I was wondering, in the films themselves, I felt like the technology kind of had its own, it was performing in a way, I guess. And that was really interesting to me, and I was curious if you thought about the technology sort of as having its own autonomy, kind of.
¿De dónde tú estabas parado, tus experiencias, la performación en una manera bien? What was the last part you said?
Oh, that if you thought about the technology sort of having its, giving it its own autonomy to perform in that poetic way that it does.
Okay. Y la tecnología que estás usando tiene una autonomía. Esa es la pregunta.
Si tiene una autonomía.
Sí.
Well, it has strong characteristics. All projectors, film projections, have their own personality, to say something. These are kind of instruments for me, even musical instruments. I used to work also with magnetic strip sound, and to mix and process it, and to make many multi-channel mixing with that sound. It is not easy to get magnetic stripped film, but well, it is a low technology, and that is nice. Small is beautiful. And well, if you have to, with 5 Super 8 projectors, you can go along and make your own performances everywhere. It will not so easy with 60mm. So it is for small places.
I also think, though, that and the way you talked about,
It gives a sort of independence.
also the way you spoke about not knowing here tonight, certainly, but I'll bet this is fairly common, whether the machines are going to break down, even though we worked with them all day today and yesterday. Well, I mean, to some extent, I think it's the nature of, it was the nature of the meeting. And here we are, again, I said at the beginning, like 30, 40 years later, these are machines that were never designed really to endure. And they're 40, 50 years old, these machines. So there's something perilous, meaning what? Dangerous, all right, about the way you work. And I think, but I also think, and what was witnessed here tonight, is that they did work. And, you know, you are such, I think, a master of the way this medium works, right? That the amount of time and care that Claudio put into what you saw tonight was very amazing. And this would not have worked. On the other hand, it didn't have to work anyway. That's part of the point. I mean, we did everything we could, and these machines vary. In fact, he labored, I might say, probably, it's fair to say, labored through living with one of those machines and not knowing if it was going to work. But I guess it did it? And it didn't seem fine. But again, you talked at the very beginning about how Super 8 is medicine for you, and you know, here it is, an extension. Well, let's put it another way. Brackets used to talk, of course, a lot about, Stan Brackett, about how the camera was an extension in a way. That's how we like to think of it, you know, as an extension of his arm, his body. And it was the way he worked. Fine. But I think that there's something yet again in the way that you work with Super 8 that it really comes from you, the person. And it really is almost organic. As I experience it. So, I think that part of that clearly is also this very, the word tenuous meaning you don't know whether it's going to happen or not. And there is that, you know, on the one hand you're so precise and so rigorous, on the other hand you set things up where they can break down. And it could have broken down tonight. I mean, it's true. So, I mean, I'm just going on about the way that you set up and dealing with these very, worn down machines, all right? And you made them work. But we're lucky, because they didn't have to work. Anyway, to me, there's a paradox in all this that is amazing. Because the fact that they worked is also, you know, complete result of who you are over as an artist over a lifetime. So I'm just my rambles, but it's fantastic. This is for me, especially with this aging technology and these aging machines. You can't get these in; these are not made. Kodak is doing something now. Someone can't do this, but it ain't these. Anyway, that's enough. Anybody else want to add or say different things? Yeah.
Thank you for your wonderful show tonight. I thought you're not simply a great filmmaker, as well as I thought you're a great film musician. That's because I think your not only your music is composed with your image, but also your image every frame is composed with your sound. So I'm wondering, could you talk a little bit about what's your process of sound making?
Yes. Well, I started to make electronic music in 1986. Before that, I used to musicalize my films with records. And, for instance, this second film, single screen film we saw, I have composed the music 3 times. It was the first film of mine that I musicalized with a very primitive synthesizer at the time, and still that music is in the magnetic strip. But the version that we heard today was made with this small synthesizer and with the help of a friend of mine that is a musician also, who played guitar in the second section, and he helped me with the digital mix. And my approach to music for films, or vice versa, is that there is no reason for making synchronization. My synchronization is thematical. I am aware of the theme of the mood of the image, and I try to approach myself with the sound. And I try with the synthesizer until I reach what I want to hear. The same when I compose chords. It is mostly experimental way of composing.
Anyone else? Anyone? Yeah? David did not. What are you going to say? That's okay.
Good night, Steve.
Is that a question?
Thanks for the good evening.
I'm sorry, you had your hand?
Oh, yeah. When you're coming up with the ideas for the performance pieces, are you always thinking of it as a performance piece, or does that kind of like come into it later? Like, are you just making a film at first and then you decide to add things to it to make a performance, or is it always an idea for a performance?
No, it is a process. For instance, the first performance, that means horizont. But I take the vocals of the name because I have taken part of the panoramic movement also. And it started in an outdoor session of my workshop. All my students were there in that beautiful park, and this is a natural park. And I had the first tests of this kind of animation of the panoramic movement. When I saw the first results on projection, I said, well, this is not enough for a single screen. It needs more screens in parallel. And I imagined it for 5 projectors, and one for each letter. And I made it once like that. It is also a piece of installation. It can be there and automatically run. But for the second Fantasmas Cromaticos, I think that It is only for a triple projection, a serial triple projection, because the human eye perceives each color separate. If you put all the colors in one single emulsion, you don't get that impression of reality, of irreality, or spectral apparition. So it is a performance piece, even if it is a single film that runs from one projector to another. And the last also can be an installation. Why not? Yeah.
I mean, can I continue on my earlier question, because you talked about installation.
Yeah.
So what is your relationship to the gallery system or the museum system?
To the gallery system, very little. But with the museums, especially contemporary art, I am doing from time to time performance like this in museums in Buenos Aires, or in the place where I live now, in Mar del Plata. We have a new contemporary art museum, and I have done performances there. I make also a bit of photography, but I have not yet shown in a gallery. I hope so to do so someday.
Because the relationship to the audience is different. In a museum or gallery space, people can come and leave when they want, and they can, in a way, edit their own viewing experience.
Yes.
So how do you feel about that?
Well, if it is an installation piece, I don't mind. It is made for that. Yes, and I have worked a lot for musicians, making visual
Installations, projections.
yeah, a sort of DJing with all technology, but I enjoy to work with musicians. I'm a musician myself. Sometimes these Fantasmas Cromaticos, I made it with a pianist that had worked with prepared piano, and not with that electronic sound. And also with electric guitarist. I enjoy to work with more people on stage. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Hey, Michael. You have any thoughts? No? All right, I think we're coming to the close. Thank you, Claudio Caldini.